Mm-hmm.
So on the show today, Feldenkrais teacher, sort of specialist in working with music and dance, Paul Pui Wo Lee. So Paul came recommended to me, and I said to Zolly, he's my guy. I said, fine, Paul, get him on the show, look him up. We sort of struggled, it's taken us a while, but we are here. Paul, if those of you who are not on YouTube will not see his beautiful gold background. Welcome, Paul.
Thank you so much. Really, I think it's a privilege and honor to be here. Yeah.
Looking forward to getting to know you. Just to sort of place you, where are you in the world right now?
Well, I'm in one of my favorite cities in the world, Copenhagen, and I'm actually going to be living here more permanently starting January. So yeah, I'm delighted.
One of my favorite cities in the world, actually, very manageable size, nice people. So a hey shout out to all our Danish listeners. I know there are a bunch in cozy there. I'm in Sintra in Lisbon. I've just arrived in its beautiful sort of magic castle, misty town outside of Lisbon. It's kind of a fun place. So how did you get there, Paul? Your journey, where does it start? Let's just start hearing about your life a bit.
Okay. Well, I'm born originally in Hong Kong, and then my family immigrated to Canada when I was 3. Then we moved back to Hong Kong, and then eventually I had the idea that, hey, maybe I can be a professional ballet dancer, because I was completely infatuated with ballet. And this was when I was living in Canada. We were in the suburbs, and there was PBS. And I believe I saw my first ballet performance. I remember it was some sort of misty bluish white trio, and I was completely taken aback. And to my mom's horror, I pointed to the TV at 4 and I said, I want to do that. It took 2 years to convince her that, okay, it's okay for a boy to do ballet. And yeah, so I had the idea that maybe I was worthy enough to at least audition for the National Ballet School in Canada. And thankfully, the director, Mavis Staines, she saw something in me beyond my limited physical capacities, my physical facility. And she accepted me. And then from there, I studied for 3 years and then graduated, but I was not destined to be a classical dancer. Was really heartbreaking, although I knew it myself, but she said it out loud. But she said, dance, ballet is such a small sliver of the whole dance pie or cake. And she sent me to Rotterdam, to what is now known as Codarts, where I began my journey as a contemporary dancer. So then I've been living in Europe since 2003, Rotterdam, then danced with the youth company, Dansa in Barcelona. So I got to call Barcelona my home. And then
let me jump in.
Yeah.
I've never been a dancer. A lot of people dance who listen to this in one sort of conscious dance or tango or whatever. What's it like being a dancer? Like, that's a life that I can't imagine. I mean, just what is it like to be a contemporary dancer, a ballet dancer, whatever? Like, give me a sense of that.
It can be fun. I think there's one thing I've learned to distinguish is that loving to dance is different from loving the dance profession. And I think it took a while to understand that the dance profession was very grueling and that maybe something wasn't completely wrong with me, that I wasn't surviving those circumstances. But I don't know, it was always a dream of mine. There's something just magical. I remember doing nutcrackers as one of the children in the Nutcracker production for the Hong Kong Ballet. And it's the backstage atmosphere and seeing the magic, and feeling like you belong to the magic. That was, I think, what really captivated me. And it's also very international life, I would say. Like, you get to travel a lot being a contemporary dancer. And these days, though, what's it like? Every day you come, if you join a company, then you would have company class normally at 10 o'clock, then it would be an hour and 15 minutes, 15-minute break, and then you rehearse with a choreographer, then you have lunch, have more rehearsals, and then maybe you would have a show that night, or you're just leading up to a premiere, but it's grueling and
tough, right? I've heard that from people. It's physically tough, mentally tough, constantly traveling all the time. I've heard it's really just like a grueling life.
It is, and I really admire dancers so much because what they're going on, their fuel is just the pure love for dance. And if you know the Pina Bausch dance company, they have some dancers which are quite mature, like over 50, but I love watching them, and I've had the opportunity to actually see them in the studio, and you just see there's almost an innocence to their love of dance. And I would say it's not for everyone because you don't realize how hard it is until like when you go to a performance, you see the razzle dazzle, it's very romantic. But backstage, it's really, really grueling work. It's taxing. So, yeah.
And you said a couple of things I'd like to drill into a little bit. So often guests actually, they come and in 5 minutes just give a whole stuff we could just talk about for days. But the magic, I think, is one, right? Like, what is that? That's interesting. But before that one, and this applies to most of our listeners. You just have to change the word dance for yoga or aikido or anything else, which is the love of dance and the business of dance. And for some people, that's the love of doing yoga versus the business of running a yoga studio. That's a different thing. And I think people often become teachers thinking, oh, I'll just be doing the love of the thing that I do twice a week, just more. Yeah. No, you won't. There's a whole lot of other life skills. There's a whole lot of pressures, there's physical demands. That's a different thing, right?
Yeah. Well, my friends, we've been speaking about, I think my circle of friends now, we're all transitioning because we feel that there needs to be another phase in our development, right? And I think it's all about meaning, and that is kind of captured in one YouTube talk by Simon Sinek, I think is his name, and he talks about your why. And I struggled actually for a long time as a professional dancer. My career as a company dancer was a mere 6 years, and I struggled because I lost my why, and I found dance so frivolous. I was like, this is, I'm like just a circus monkey doing tricks, people clap. I didn't understand what was the greater meaning behind that. And for me, it became quite debilitating because it was very hard to get out of bed eventually. And then I fell into a depression. And I think that goes, and when I found Feldenkrais because I had a neck injury. And it was a very difficult time at that point because I had this neck injury, and then which told me that what I loved to do, which was dance, was actually hurting me. And I didn't know who I could be after being a dancer.
A couple of things. Oh my God, it's good. This is profound from a trauma point of view. Most of us who do yoga, martial arts, dance, we do it because it's our why. We love it. And then it hurts us. And psychologically, that's quite a strong and strange thing. You hear about this, like children who are abused, it's like they love their dad, but their dad's hitting them. It's like we're all kind of the abused children of our art. Does that make sense? Because the thing we love hurts us because we're doing it so much, or we've done it for a certain amount of time, right? Like that's a pretty profound thing right there.
Yeah. And so what I really, I'm quite happy these days, and especially when I'm teaching in Feldenkrais, and now I'm actually at the teaching at the National Academy of Performing Arts here, teaching Feldenkrais, teaching ballet. And it's so interesting because I just smile when people tell me, oh, this is hurting, that is hurting, I feel limited. And then I tell them, oh, what if you're the one hurting yourself? And if that's the case, then you're also able to find ways that don't hurt yourself. Let's explore options outside of what you currently know. And and then let's see if that helps. And most of the time it does. And then you realize it's all a matter of getting out of the conditioning. Like it's only in these recent years that I actually understand what the movie The Matrix was about.
Okay, go for it. This PhD, apparently there's more PhDs on that film than any other film.
Oh, really?
Yeah. What's it about?
Because, so you asked me what's it like to be a dancer, and then I gave you the schedule, the usual rundown. But now I see, so this whole thing about feeling that dance was frivolous, it was so awful for me, because as a young kid, I just had this idea that that meaning was very important to me. I wanted to be honest with what I did. And so now when I see a dancer holding the honor of being an artist, I see that there's a duty and responsibility that comes with that. So we're not just dancing, like now, contemporary dance especially, this is not what dance used to be. Dance was not something you observed, right? Dance was something you participated in. But now it has evolved, that it's become like a theater art, and that I frame it in terms of being a moving painting, it's a moving landscape. And it's by observing this that people get to reflect on the human experience and ask questions. And so for the dancer, knowing how to manipulate, to be a chameleon and shift, into these different states, these different styles, qualities of dancing, you're speaking about the different qualities along the whole spectrum of human experience, right? So what you experience, you're giving a visual experience. And I think you really succeed as a dancer, or even as an artist, when it becomes visceral, when people start feeling something new, and then it poses questions. So, in preparing for this podcast, I mean, preparing is a bit too formal. I was just sort of riding my bike, and that's when a lot of ideas come. I was just thinking how, being an artist means choice. And that's what Feldenkrais helped me discover. That whereas I just felt that I had to be a dancer, as I knew and was told what a dancer was, now I'm very happy being a piece of artwork, a moving piece of artwork, when I'm just walking along the street, going to the supermarket, because the way I move is already something that I feel pleasure through. And also, what if I can walk with confidence, if I can walk with this experience, this composition of being happy with myself, then will other people be affected by that? And how do I change the climate? Like, I'm just thinking about Copenhagen, because I find that people are really happy here. And then there's just something that glows, and it's something, I won't say postural, but I guess that's like the common word, because Feldenkrais, he used another word. Instead of posture, he used acture, right? Which I love. So it's putting action. So it's the dynamic posture of action. So I don't know. So now this is, what I think a dancer is. And when you have this honor, and you feel the responsibility of your witnessed actions, then I think, whoa, we're getting to what art can do for society, can do for the human spirit. Yeah.
Wonderful. So what we're doing has to have that bigger why behind it. And you found that in movement and dance, a bigger why. And then you added the Feldenkrais. We should probably say very briefly, we've had a bunch of Feldenkrais teachers on, the listeners,
Yay!
If they're new listeners, though, they might not have heard some of those episodes. So do you want to say just very concisely what Feldenkrais is, and maybe, how did you start that? Was there, as a dancer, was it like, ow, everything hurts, what do I do about that? Or what was the beginning?
So maybe it's, thank you for giving me the idea. Maybe it's better to just talk about how it helped me, and then maybe that will explain the method. So I had 2 minor hernias in my neck I was doing this lift with a woman in the company in Gothenburg, and then like all of a sudden it was the strangest feeling. Like I just couldn't, I just lost strength. So I had to stop. There was this like really weird nervy pain. So I go to the doctor, and then we get an MRI, and 2 minor hernias in the neck. Didn't feel minor. And then I did the conventional rehab. I think this was the rehab center who worked with the national hockey team in Sweden. But I was just like, oh, but I feel like the image that came to mind was that I'm just wrapping more tape around a leaky faucet. You know, I'm not fixing the issue. And I had always this like creeping feeling that like, Paul, you don't really know what you're doing. You're excellent at faking it, but you don't really know precisely what you're doing. So finally, I went to a Feldenkrais practitioner, and I laid down on the table, and the first remark was, "Oh, your ribs don't move when you breathe." And without a blink, I said, "What ribs?" And then it was this, you know, all of these realizations surged and surfaced. I was like, whoa, I have no concept of my ribs. Well, yes, I do. People have told me, ballet teachers have told me, put your ribs away, put your ribs down, you know, hide the ribs, don't move the ribs. And then I remember another teacher saying that in order to sing better, and it was, I think maybe just one remark that I heard in music school, but or not music school, music class. And then I just held on to that one remark, and I just tried not to move my chest and move my belly. So I had acquired, I won't say that these teachers did the wrong thing, but I was the one who held on to all these pointers, these corrections. And that's the way I moved. So one of my inspirations for dance is Pina Bausch, you know, it's Trisha Brown, Cloudgate Dance Theater, the Forsyth Company. And so it was so much, especially with the Pina Bausch company, you know, the normal image is women with their hair out and they're just swinging, you know, their heads are always just like swaying. And I never knew how to do that. So when he spoke about the ribs, I thought, oh, wow, I really have no idea what I'm doing. So then through the training, well, then I wasn't sure that I was resonating with yoga or Pilates, anything else, which many dancers move on to become. And then I wanted to be something a bit more alternative. And then I was thinking, could I be a Feldenkrais practitioner? And then I went to, in fact, London. I flew up there and met this dance teacher as well as Feldenkrais teacher, Thomas Kamper. And I had a session with him. And I remember in one of his classes, it was just lying on your back and reaching with an arm out to the sides, up and down. And then he was like, and then I was like, whoa, how do I feel so stuck? I feel like I can't go anywhere with my arms. How is it? I'm a dancer. I'm a professional dancer. And I don't know how to do this. And he's like, could you roll your head? And then again, I was chuckling at myself. How stupid, Paul. Like, what made you think that you couldn't move your head?
Right.
And then he's like, okay, what if you let your ribs fold and the ones on the other side open? And then it was just like light bulbs, you know, it was like a Beyonce concert, like lights.
Right. Yeah. And there is that feeling, I've done a little bit of Feldenkrais, there is that feeling, isn't there, of like, why was I not doing that? Like, because like no one was stopping me but me. Like I wasn't moving my head, or I was trying to turn around without twisting my torso, or whatever it was. And there is this feeling like, it's a little bit kind of Homer Simpson moment, isn't it? Every Feldenkrais.
Exactly. So now when I encounter what I don't know, it like I bash myself. I don't bash myself so much anymore. It's more like, oh yay, I survived, this far without knowing that. How much better can life be when I do have this new knowledge? So yeah, then my whole, so after like I did the training, and then I realized that wow, everything is it's not about, so if you have a neck issue, it's not really, usually it's not about your neck, you know, and that sort of blind spot is questioning, oh, how can I improve the working relationship between all my parts? So it's not, how are the ribs supporting the spine so that the neck can move, the head can move. How about the pelvis? Then when you're standing, then your ankles, do you not move your ankles? And for those people who are listening, if you're standing and you just like try to look around the room, and if you try not to move your ankles whatsoever, it's super odd. If you had like cement boots, right, that were just holding your ankles, it's all of a sudden you feel that there's this freeze. So I think that Feldenkrais really gave me this beautiful way of seeing how truly everything is connected. We are a system, and it's more about working on the working dynamic, the quality of how everything works together, and not isolating things like bad neck, you know, bad hip joints.
Contrast with dance is now a lot of Western modern dance, there'll be a limb that will come out or a foot that will come out as if the rest of the body didn't exist. And that's often considered beautiful. The opposite of Feldenkrais, as far as I can see.
And I don't know how much dance you have watched, but I think it's, you know, from your Aikido background, you'll also see that like the good dancers, the good movers, there's something martial artsy about it, which is why when I watched the Cloud Gate Dance Theater in Taiwan, you all have to watch them. And they had this trilogy based on the art of Chinese calligraphy, which is actually a kung fu, you know, it's in that family. And when you know, there is this like, it's very tantric, I will say. Like sensuality is another big thing for me, sensuality for this life force. But when you see these dancers, they're trained in the Graham technique, but then they have a lot of serious Tai Chi and a specific form of that. I can't tell you the name right now, or it's like Tai Chi Dao Ying, that's in Mandarin. And then they also have Kung Fu, like, and Chinese classical dance in their background. So there's something in Tai Chi I learned, which is Yat Dong Ba Dong in Cantonese. One move, 100 moves. And so when you see some people doing Tai Chi and we'll say it looks a little bit stiff or something something's missing, you know, it's just very plain. It's because they don't have that in their embodied philosophy, that when they do the hands, it's only the hands and the arms that are moving. But in fact, it's in every joint, there's something moving. So it's more like being a body of molecules, water molecules, that when you displace something else will have to adjust, and it's a whole chain reaction. And so you're always like liquid and always moving through the stability. So it's funny how you mentioned that there's a difference between the Western dance and Eastern dance, but when you look at good movers, I feel that we're at this universal place.
Yeah, I've only seen different people, whether it's a punch or an elegant move, where it's almost like the left toes are moving at the same time as the right the fingers. Everything's involved in that, even if it's just a subtle involvement, you know. And there's a beauty to that that's it's compelling when you see that kind of unified movement, isn't it? It's very compelling.
Yeah. So, you know, if I had a choice, I almost remind my students every day, if I had a choice, I wouldn't have started with ballet. I was such a good mover. I saw a video of me twirling when I was 4 or 5 in the living room in Canada. And it was just so well coordinated. And, you know, I knew how to move before I think I got all these ideas of what ballet was. And, you know, I look at Aikido and I wish that I had started with martial arts and the hip hop street dance forms, because I feel that that's much more functional. And there's also something about playfulness, right? That it's not just about Oh, well, this is more about the street dance, I think, that there's something about just having an idea and playing with that. And there's improvisation. So you're not already closing yourself in a box of what you should and shouldn't do. Yeah.
Yeah, it seems to me that martial arts have a feedback loop that if the movement's not very efficient, you kind of, or there isn't that full movement there, then the feedback loop of dance I see just is people getting injured, but that feedback loop seems to be over years quite often. Although there is, I guess there's an aesthetic feedback loop, which is it looks different. I guess there's, you know, the sort of response of the audience is one immediate. I mean, very interested in things with immediate feedback loops like stand-up comedy, martial arts, romantic engagements. All these things have this very immediate bit of feedback, which means you learn very quickly if it's sometimes a bit brutal. And things that lack that, or if there's a longer time frame, you're not necessarily learning the lesson to that. But yeah,
It's so interesting.
Go on, after you.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, you just brought up feedback loops, and it just made me think about how people have this image of dancers being very aware of their bodies and very sensitive. And I shut them down right away. I said, yes, there are these feedback loops, but I find that a lot of dancers, especially the ones that injure themselves constantly, they're not listening to the feedback that's coming in. They're not very sensitive to themselves. And in a way, it's almost like dance is this constant act of punishment, you know, to them.
Or there's also a numbing necessary to get through the day, right? Like I would say the sort of least embodied people normally are dancers, sports people, and Americans because they're constantly performing. Like this, and there's a necessity to, if you're in pain and you've got to get through performance number 28. You know, I spoke to a dated girl actually who used to be part of the one of the shows in London where they hit all the dustbins. What's it called?
Oh, Stomp.
Yes, and Stomp. She said, very interesting. She said, I said, what are the cast like? They all do yoga and Feldenkrais and meditation. She said, interesting, half of them do, because it's a lot of impact in that show. They're hitting.
Yeah.
She said the other half just drink and drug and numb themselves and try and forget about it. And it's almost like there was two different paths that the dancers, because she actually had a budget for body work, but half the dancers spent that on booze apparently, and it was the other half spent it on Feldenkrais and other things. It almost like there's two ways of surviving the sort of path of sensitivity and awareness, like how am I damaging myself, and then the path of numbing, right? Like they're both ways to stop pain.
Wow, like you're really touching upon something quite fundamental, and it goes to my why, and I think we share a similar why, which is how can we help people take better care of themselves? Because when you talk about this drinking, boozing up, I remember a teacher that I had. She came from this really prestigious Dutch contemporary dance company, and the dancers in the 90s, she said, you know, it seems like everyone was just using alcohol to get through, you know, the difficulty. And for me, I wish my why for sharing Feldenkrais is to give people an alternative and actually to empower them with tools that they can use to find a more sustainable way to perform better, to feel better. And I think that in the end, I always say, like, you're more spectacular because of that. Just because you take care of yourself, I don't think you're taking away from the quality of what you can do. You're actually optimizing it. And when you know, the other thing is about medication, where I, going back to Canada sometimes, and I see it seems like every other commercial is about a drug. And I think it's even worse in the United States. And I just see how people, like, even when I'm watching Netflix, and I love watching American series, it just seems like so casual, you know, oh, I'm going to take a Ritalin, I'm going to take I don't know, there are many drugs, right? And then you just take that, oh, I'll take a NyQuil. That medication has become the answer. Whereas if you look at, you know, the book for Breath by James Nestor, wow. I'm suggesting it to everyone. It's like you can do so much to help yourself just through breath. You know, if you need a change in chemicals, the chemical environment within you, there are things that you can do. I mean, maybe it even saves money, but like in the end, why do you not use what, like, this beautiful design? Like, that's what I've woken up to. Like my why for teaching is showing people, like, look how beautiful you are. How, like, you just need to know how to use what you've been given, right? Yeah.
It's interesting. Often we're talking about self-care really here, right? Which is a very big conversation in the embodiment world. Often, you know, people's self-care comes down to sort of, you know, deep self-esteem stuff, how they're conditioned, you know, society. There's, I think, almost in the arts, there's another reason not to self-care, isn't there? That it's seen as you sort of sacrifice yourself on the altar of your art, right? Like, it's sort of noble and good to destroy yourself for dance. And dancers will show you their feet, you know, they'll be like, oh, look how bad my feet are, look at all these, you know, problems. Do you think dancers are beautiful? Just take their shoes off, okay? Do not, if you've never dated a dancer, if you want to date a dancer, never look at their feet, okay? You won't want to put them ever again. It's, yeah. At least fuck them in a position where you can't see their feet. That's my advice. So, so what about this piece of, like, self-care isn't for artists? Because, and I think a lot of self-esteem stuff, you know, self-loathing can hide behind that, but it's kind of a nice excuse. It's like, the gods make me do it, or this is somehow worth sacrificing for. Like, most dance careers are incredibly short because physically people don't sustain, right?
Yeah.
You are sacrificing an altar.
Yeah. Well, I mean, people are quite good about not taking the responsibility for themselves, right? It's just much better or it's more convenient sometimes to say, it's not my fault. This was something that was imposed upon me. Well, Feldenkrais was a judo black belt, and the thing is to not meet it with resistance. And I think that those who are ready, great, take responsibility and start changing your ways. And I think for those who are not ready yet, it's also, you know, Feldenkrais has helped me a lot to not judge and just say what is good, because he describes everything. Like, he says, if you're breathing just in one certain way, which is like good, that's not really breathing. Knowing how to breathe according to what the situation is asking for your nervous system to pick up on that, that is what real breathing is. And it's often, you know, he's often quoted how his work is about restoring human dignity, right? It's about having choice, having flexibility. And it's the nervous system being able to choose what's best at the moment. And when it comes to sitting, this is why I don't like to talk about posture, because posture has this, it implies that something is good and something is incorrect. But he said,
right, you've got to stay in that thing as well. Yeah.
So is slumping bad posture? Like, sitting in, and you should be able to sit anyway. And, you know, a lot of people at offices, they're like, oh, I'm not sitting properly. And I'm like, but like, it has never occurred to me, because I'm like, if I feel uncomfortable, I shift. And it's like, we were not designed to be sitting 7 hours at a desk. Like, that's this is a very, very small portion of our human history. If you look at, you know, we're animals. We respond, we're mobile. So yeah. So this thing about taking care of yourself as an artist and how it might not be part of the artist's identity, I think it's something that we can work on and say, you know, those who think this way, I think that there has been great art because of this suffering and torment. Let's not take away from that. And that forms it's something for us to contrast, to find contrast to. So if people hadn't suffered before, then maybe we won't know what well-being is. So I would like to, like, I choose to see what is actually functional in everything, right? And those who love actually there are some Feldenkrais trainers that they say that they've had really successful sessions with clients in terms of they came with pain, they left without pain, but they had situations where people were upset that you took their pain away from them because it was so much part of their identity. Like, who am I without my hip pain anymore? So yeah, it's for those who are ready.
What function is the pain serving? It might not be obvious. And you know, if someone's numbing, sometimes there's a good reason for that. You know, I do a lot of work with trauma, and it's like, well, there might be a reason for these trauma patterns, and they're nearly always adaptive in some way, even if there's pain. And I guess it's just the other conversation of confusing an occupational hazard with an occupational necessity, right? Like there's an occupational hazard that we get obsessed with our embodied arts and destroy ourselves as the muse takes us and does what she wants with us. And then, but that's not a necessity. So that's a thing to watch out for if you love what you do. And you know, I'd rather have a longer career, and I'd rather be teaching what I teach in my 80s or 90s. And if I'm going to do that, I need to learn a bit of Feldenkrais, you know, a bit more awareness stuff. So tell me about dignity, actually, because I hear that in Feldenkrais a lot. I've done a year of Feldenkrais training. I like it a lot. Very cool art. You know, got a lot from it. Dignity, and is it somehow the idea it's more dignified to have more options, more freedom, rather than being stuck in one mode? Is that kind of what he's getting at there?
Completely. That I think it's to always have wriggle room. Like if you think about, you know, sometimes we would be doing these weird looking Feldenkrais lessons, these movement lessons, ATMs, right? And you're like lying on your side and you're moving your shoulder, the top one, up, down, forward, back, make a circle. And then you have lessons where all of a sudden you're moving the bottom shoulder. And then you're like, okay, how do I do that? And then you sort of squirm, and then, oh, you find a way that everything moves together. And then you're like, okay, but what is this serving? And then you're reminded, okay, Feldenkrais was a judo man. And apparently some of his students who actually studied with him personally, they said wherever he went, I remember the story very clearly. He said wherever he went, he would always check the environment because he was Israeli, he's Jewish. And in his time, it was still quite dangerous, right? And then he always had to make sure that he had a means of escape, and perhaps more than one escape route. So knowing about judo, then the dignity is to be flexible in a way that if someone pins you down, you can actually get out of it. And yeah, have you spoken about sex in your podcasts?
We can speak about sex as much as you want. That's not a problem. Feel
Awesome.
free to be as explicit or sweary as you like as well. This isn't American TV. There's no censorship here. Go for it.
Okay. I mean, it was just after a 5-day intensive Feldenkrais workshop I did in Germany. And then I meet this very athletic, very attractive man. And then, you know, we had sex, and then somehow we got into like a wrestling thing. I don't know, it just happened. It was all very organic. I mean, after these 5 days, I was impressed with myself. I remember just thinking, whoa, I've never done this better. Like, I'm feeling myself. And it was like I was getting so nerdy because I knew where I was in space so well. And I also knew what he was feeling with my different movements, that I felt I felt completely manipulative of the whole situation, you know, that I was listening to the breath. Anyways, Feldenkrais practitioner, nerdy stuff. But when it came to this wrestling thing, he was big. He played soccer. You wouldn't really be able to tell that he was gay, and just so like buff. And anyways, he tried to like pin me down, you know, do these locks on me, and I would just wriggle. Like, I didn't fight. I just wriggled, and then I came out. But not only that, when I pinned him, I locked him, and he couldn't. Like, he had so much more muscular mass than I did.
You're moving more efficiently, you're moving that, yeah.
Yeah, and so that's when I woke up to the fact that, whoa, hey, I'm actually quite powerful, because I always saw myself as someone weaker, but then that was quite an amazing realization, that through my understanding that of myself and of Feldenkrais, then I was like, whoa, like time after time, he could not, like, he was flabbergasted. He couldn't, I was shorter than him, everything was not working out to my favor, but he couldn't just, I made him into a pretzel.
You told him you knew Jewish kung fu, and that was it. So, and yeah, it's an incredible thing. And I think it's also very empowering. And I've seen this with kids. I've seen this with smaller people, with women. Like with the first time they either get out of something, Sistema's great for that as well, wriggling out of things.
Oh
And
yeah, that is so beautiful.
lovely art. And then, or the first time they kind of are really able to control the situation, they're like, oh, I'm not a victim. And I think that's something that does come from that martial application.
Yeah.
Though, and this is why I love everything, right, Paul? Because it's like martial arts limits expression and emotion quite often, and Feldenkrais goes very deep and sensitive, but in a very particular way. And most Japanese martial arts don't have much creativity in them compared to, say, improv. And I love, they're all related, but they point in a slightly different direction, at least at first, And I think it's very natural that a person studies dance or martial arts, and then they go, okay, but what else is there? I've done all this form. What about this other thing? So I don't know. That's why I do what I do. I love trying to fit the big picture of all those things together, as listeners will know, because we have so many different kinds of people on.
Yeah, I think it's a sign of a healthy nervous system, a healthy human being, when there's curiosity, right? That you're thinking, oh, you start seeing opportunities and chances. And I think that all that we do, whatever methodology, it sort of leads us. And I think this goes back to dignity, being what, a person who is living the life they want, and not a life that just they happen to fall into, and not even know that they have a choice outside of their present consciousness. I mean, we're back at the Matrix, right?
I'm with you. And people think if they're like intelligent or left wing, that they're out of this. They think, oh, that's just for the conservatives. I spoke to a guy, I was having dinner alone last night, and there was a Swedish girl who was walking the trail near where I was in Portugal. I said, "I want you to join me." We'd both come into Elo, so we started talking, and every single one of her views were prescribed by the Swedish liberal textbook. It was like I could have written down her views when she told me she was Swedish and left wing, and at 25 years old, well, actually 28 years old actually. And it wasn't that she wasn't intelligent. It wasn't that she wasn't. It was prescribed. It was there. It was like, I know what you're going to say about immigration. I know what you're going to say about healthcare. And it's like every single topic I guessed her view on. And she's like, how are you doing it? How do you know what I'm going to say? And I'm like, well, because you're doing what you've been given. And it might be great. I mean, there's a lot to be, we both like Scandinavia and, Scandinavian healthcare. There's a lot to love there,
Yeah.
But if that's all you're just doing what's prescribed, whether you be a Muslim fundamentalist, a Midwest conservative, or a Swedish liberal, it just feels like such a shame to me that there isn't an exploration of different possibilities,
Well, Mark, I have a question for you. Like, I don't know if you already have, but like, don't you have this desire also to change, like, for example, the healthcare system? That I was saying, maybe we have to really look at healthcare in a different way, where you're not just being evaluated and then like prescribed medication, but then I mean, I think some healthcare systems, they're starting to prescribe yoga, breath. Hopefully, they'll be also including Feldenkrais into that.
Definitely a turning point right now, because half the world thinks healthcare is vaccinating himself and forcing other people to do that at threat. And the other half of the world seems to be looking at a more holistic approach. And I'm not saying either's right or wrong, actually, because I'm not anti-vax, but I'm anti-coercion. And I'm seeing quite a split developing in health. Like, actually, this person I was with last night, when they found out I wasn't vaccinated, they wouldn't hug me at the end of the evening. They said, I won't touch you. And I was like, but touch is really good for your immune system. And I have no symptoms, and I've had a test a few days ago. And they're like, no. And it was like, oh, we're putting our faith in a different thing. I'm putting my faith in dance and my immune system and health and living well and touch and play. And she's putting her health in expert drug that's been put in her body. And I'm not saying it's ever wrong. I'm taking medication myself right now, actually. I'm not saying it's ever wrong. But it was clear that we had a very different, we're in a different camp when it came from what establishes health. And of course, neither of us is really wrong, right? But I was like, there's something happening there in the world of a split, I think.
Yeah. And it's really hard, I think. Well, I find it quite dangerous territory to start talking about right and wrong. And, you know, as I said, I like to see what is good about everything, that there's, like, just to bring it back into my dance teaching experience, I used to be, I think, much more liberal and say, oh, just do anything that you feel like, you know, the more feel like your feeling is going to guide you. And then I realized that no, actually, we do need guidelines. And to say that something is right or wrong sometimes is also functional. But I guess ultimately, I hope that people know that they can always question, and that's what's not always explicitly present, right? That I think maybe we need to continue to have that space to just have a discussion. Is this the right way? Like, is this way the best to take care of our health at this moment? How about another option? What is right about something that has already been established, you know, that everyone believes in? And then what are some alternatives? And then I think it's another big word that Feldenkrais uses is flexibility, right? Simply flexibility. And I find that it's having a discussion that keeps us as human beings flexible. So we're not just subscribing to one doctrine and then like completely being blind sided to.
Beautiful. Listen, Paul, I've really enjoyed this. I'm going to shoot you my phone number there in case you want to WhatsApp, because anyone who wrestles big bears must be an awesome guy. So I've really I've really enjoyed this conversation, actually, genuinely. It's really sort of woke me up. Actually, I was quite tired, so I didn't go to sleep last night. I was the curiosity always gets turned on at a certain point with a new guest. I'm like, oh, and then I come alive, and it's a very lovely feeling actually doing this. It's an honor to do this. Where do people find you if they want to like check out? I'm going to call this the Movement Matrix, by the way, Paul. I think.
Okay.
And it's a nice title. Where do people find you if they want to check out your stuff or get Feldenkrais lessons or whatever? Where do they go?
Yeah, my website is www.paulsfeldenkraisprojects.com. So that's projects plural. paulsfeldenkraisprojects.com. Yeah, and if you find me on Instagram, Paul_moves. Yeah.
Great. Well, I've enjoyed this, and I hope I see you again. So I'm going to Copenhagen very likely next year. So if they let me,
please let me know. Let me know,
and then I'll put Copenhagen on my phone. And when I'm there, we can get together.
Yes, and
all
eat.
Right. always. Paul, we can't fuck, so we have to eat. That's all that's left. So this has been a real pleasure. So I'll see you later, mate.
Yes, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Take care.